Hi there, and welcome to the Surviving Trauma Stories of Hope podcast. This week, I am joined on the podcast by the lovely Destiny Rael from her home in Los Angeles, California. Destiny is a certified transformational life and loss coach and a grief support leader. She has been through major changes and struggles in her life that led her to experience her soul awakening. Now, she navigates life from an awakened state, and she has grown exponentially inside and out, found her purpose in her pain, and has transformed and rebuilt her life. In this episode, Destiny and I talk about loss, grief, career, spiritual awakenings, and creative healing. But most importantly, we talk about her late brother, Joseph, who passed away in 2011, and the devastating impact that his passing had on her. Her brother was a singer and was musically known as Joseph Tobin. He has 3 full albums: The Rogue Collective, Joseph Tobin, and Ride With Me. I took the opportunity to listen to his music, and I was touched so deeply. He has a rawness and an authenticity that he brings to his music. When he sings, you feel. If you don't believe me, feel free to listen to all his songs as much as you like. Honestly, I recommend you purchase any of his albums or the separate tracks on his page, which I will link in the show notes. Thank you to my listeners for joining me on this journey. Comment on the posts on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and let me know what you think of this episode. Also head to Amazon.com and get your copy of my book, Ray of Light, and please leave me a rating and review. It would mean the world to me. As always, stay tuned and keep listening. Hi, Destiny. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm good. Welcome to Surviving Trauma Stories of Hope podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
It's just been awesome to catch up with you. I know it's been a while since we've spoken, but I'm glad that we're making this time, and we're going to chat about life coaching, grief, loss, and we'll touch on several aspects of that as we go along. In your life, there's been so many different experiences that have led you and put you on your path that you are on now. And I'm curious to know, how that happened for you. Because, we can go through many experiences, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it becomes your life path. So how did that happen for you? Because you are a life coach now.
Yes, that's a great question. And I love that you gave space for the fact that many people go through, experiences or traumas or challenges in their life. And that doesn't necessarily mean they have to go into a life of service to have an impact on people. Or, I know many people that have gone through different things, and in their own ways or in their lives, they might end up being of service, but not professionally, if you will. So sounds like what you're asking is, how did I lead this path? And I guess what I would say with that is I've always had a heart of service in a bigger way. Even, I can't remember if we shared before, but I've had many seasons of my life, but, my past, I came to Los Angeles for music. My day job was a makeup artist. So I've had different careers in my life that help me fulfill different expressions of myself. But I've always had this other part of interest in self-development and growth and counseling. When I was a little girl, I was asked to be they were trying peer counseling in the schools. So I had a little clipboard and I was walking around to help, just diffuse some conflict with, I think I was in middle school. I was always in, volunteer work. So I share this to say is that I think that part of me was always there, as many parts, multi-passionate, multi-dimensional. But when after the, I know we're going to talk about that, but after the passing of my brother, I think that it made me obviously question a lot, and just, if I'm going to be here on earth, and which made me question why I'm here on earth, but here I am, how can my life be more of meaning and purpose and fulfillment? I didn't want to continue having day jobs to make money to support these other dreams that I have and still have, those are still a part of me, but I wanted something that was fulfilling. So I really, I think, took skills and skills that I have and parts of me into a path of professional, which went to school for coaching. I also am a grief support leader, went to training. I've been a crisis counselor and just expanding that way to serve and help. And now here we are. So I hope that answered your question.
No, it does. It does. I was on a call for a Heal Your Life session about 2 nights ago, and we were talking about passion and purpose and how we find our passion and purpose. And one of the interesting, I suppose, revelations is that when we meet our purpose, right? Because our passion really is what we love, and our purpose is then what we do, right? How we ignite that fire. If we had to use that as a metaphor, was that it's always within us, the things that we do. Just exactly what you've described.
Definitely.
And it's interesting how in life we almost, I wouldn't say we suppress it, but it's almost like we say to ourselves, I'm going to live my own life and I'm going to try this. And your intuition, you that's telling me I'm going to be a coach, shush, hush, I'm going to do what I want to do. And then life brings us all the way back to that passion and purpose, right?
Absolutely. Is a great point, because I would say for myself, if I reflect whether the times that I was a makeup artist and working with women, I love makeup. I love the creative aspect, but I can't tell you how many women would leave my, and even if I was working in a department store, wasn't a professional setting of counseling, but I would know their life story and they'd be walking, hugging, crying to me, and then also having some makeup that, feeling good about themselves.
Yes.
When I was on auditions, I remember clearly, even in auditions where I would have, I don't want to say competitive nature, but if we're both, going for the same part or the same thing, and I would be counseling them in the audition of inspiring them, like, you can do it. And, I think in my professional career, I went, as I got older, in the music business, and I was in management and recording studios and working with recording artists and working with, people in the music industry. And they would be in my office and quite literally would be like coaching them on their lives or their personal lives. So I say this to say, to your point, when I look at the thread of my life, there was always this part of me that felt, this idea of just loving, helping people come to their own truths and hold space for their pain or challenges they're experiencing. And it's more about the acceptance of that, because I felt, I want people to see me as a singer. I know I am this, as opposed to really allowing all of the multiple expressions of ourselves to come out. And one doesn't negate the other. I can still be a coach and still love to sing. I can still, all of those things are parts of us. And I think that in itself are beliefs that we hold that or somewhere along the way we're told we can't do these things. But at the same time, sometimes we go through life and our values change. Things are more important to us. Right now in my life, the balance, as much as I love singing, that pursuit and that career shifted for me. And it did become more about this part of my life and service and coaching that fulfills me more. But it doesn't mean that I don't have space and desire to sing. Hopefully that made sense. But it is about passion and purpose and owning that, accepting that, and allowing it to come forth at the seasons of our lives,
I agree with you. And I also feel that in some ways, society's put out, and I've been thinking about it actually a lot this week because I recently experienced it, is that society expects us only to be pigeonholed. If you are a coach, that is all that you can do. And if you work a 9-to-5 job, that's all you can do. And you should stay within that. And I think sometimes for people, it's really difficult to wrap their head around the fact that we are multifaceted and we can do all of these different things, to your point, if there is balance between all of it. And yeah, that's awesome. I wanted to touch on your singing career, and I wanted to tell you that I've been listening to you and your brother's music, and you have a phenomenal voice. And I'm just going to say it. I think I'm in love with your brother.
Oh,
Also, I must tell you, we are born a day apart.
oh, you and I?
Your brother and I,
Oh my
5th, 6th.
goodness.
I
Wow.
know.
That is powerful.
And
Wow.
he has such a beautiful voice. When
Hmm.
I first listened to his music, it just, I mean, I didn't even listen to the acoustics, album yet, but it's incredible. Like the way that he just touched me.
Mm.
And I listened to the song, the one about hope that the two of you did together.
Oh, I need hope.
Oh my gosh,
Yes.
Destiny. It's
Mm.
beautiful, beautiful,
Oh,
beautiful. And
thank you so much.
so I can feel that loss and that
Hmm.
grief that you must have experienced when he passed away so suddenly. So the work that you all started with this personal journey.
Hmm. Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much for just taking the time, that to listen. And, that's been a big part of, I feel, my path is just sharing my brother's music and sharing his heart and, continuing that legacy. And it's a delicate balance because I take it very personally. And so there's part of me that wants to hold it because the risk of someone not liking it, and that's my own personal thoughts, I guess, the vulnerability in that, but also the desire for his music to be shared and out there. So thank you for that. It helps, my family and I to continue, and in him, his dream. My brother and I came out here for music, and that was something we shared in our whole life, and we sang together. So it was a big part of our journey and also his journey, his path and his purpose. So it was obviously a devastating. My brother was my best friend. We, were only 16 months apart. I mean, there's so many different facets of our relationship. So it was the single most difficult and devastating thing I've experienced. And I have experienced a lot. So the music aspect is really important to me to share that and to keep that going. At the same sense, I think it's also what kind of stopped me from singing. And I know he wouldn't want that in me, but and I'm trying to find my way back to that as I shared a little bit. But as far as the grief work, yes, and that took me a few years. It will be 12 years this January, and my brother is, his birthday. You have a similar a day apart, January 6th, and his passing I call Angel Day is January 8th. So it was a few years to find my way in this work. I've always been drawn to spiritual connection and journey and was on that path and of awakening and self-development and all the things that we were just discussing. But I never in a million years thought I would be doing work in grief and have that experience to then now be helping and serving others. But to tie in even what you were saying before about this purpose, I started volunteering, and I still do. It's an active part of my life as a grief support leader here in Los Angeles. And it was one of the first experiences that I felt ironically alive in doing the work, even though we're having conversations about death and grief. I just felt the sense of purpose and fulfillment, and recognizing not only just the idea of helping people and serving that community, but it was an exchange of healing. They're sharing their stories. And in this particular organization, they don't know my story. It's not about me or my journey, but it's present. I have it. So there's a healing aspect. So most definitely, I can say that I would likely not be in this work had that not happened. And although it doesn't help to say, oh, thank God this happened. Now I'm on this path, because I would do anything to have my brother back and not be in this line of work if that's what that meant. But as life happens, and it's not so much what happens to us, it's how we respond to that. And the fact that this was a part of my destiny, his destiny, for whatever reasons that perhaps we'll know in another realm, it felt a part of my path and my healing and my purpose to transform my own pain into this purpose and where I'm at today and doing grief work and transformational work and life I say life coaching because it's all life. We're living this
Yeah.
thing called life, right? And sometimes there's loss and challenges and grief, and sometimes there's joy and triumphs and celebration. And then sometimes it's all together, you might be, and I've had clients that have had this where they're so excited they're getting married, and yet they're also processing grief that their father's not going to be walking them down the aisle, or even grief at lots of parts of themselves in this new path that they're going on. So my work is helping bridge that gap. And I find I've lived it many times over. So yeah, I think most definitely the passing of my brother shifted me in this work in a much deeper way, where it felt part of my destiny, if you will.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I like what you say. You can have the excitement of life, but then also you can grieve parts of it, and the two can
Absolutely.
go together.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't often think about it. And I was going to ask you about being a transformational life coach and sort of what that means. And I think it is that we do life all the time, and we can't sort of. One of the big lessons that I learned is that we need to live an integrated life, not in silos. We can't experience life in silos. So when we are experiencing the grief and loss, we can also experience the happiness and the joy that life brings. And I think sometimes when we in that darkness of despair, of grief, and of the loss, it almost feels wrong. It feels wrong to feel joy. It feels wrong to feel happy. Yeah. What is the main focus when you were recovering and going through your own grief process? What was the main focus for you that really helped you to go through it and we come out the other side?
Are you asking more of like, what was my process, or within?
Yeah. What did you focus on to help you get through your grief?
I see. That is a good question. I don't know that I had a particular focus. What I would say that it was definitely a journey that, I felt prior to that, I was already on this spiritual awakening, and felt very on my path of this enlightened, evolved, I'd previously been through a divorce and had other things that I'd been experiencing. So I already thought that I had come to this breaking point to then come out of it with this new insight. And after my brother, it just brought me to my knees, where everything that I thought I knew, I didn't. And I'm talking from spirituality to religion to belief to faith. I just felt angry at life, angry at this creator, God, all these concepts that I thought I finally figured out. So I think if I were to put that into a focus, I think it put me back on a path of those fundamental questions of, why am I here? What am I doing? What is the point of even living? They sound simple. They're obviously difficult to answer. And I think we're always answering them as we live. I don't know that I have that clear-cut answer. But within that journey and that focus, it was also, you can't bypass the process of the pain and the grief. And I was in a very dark space. And sometimes I handled it in healthy ways, meditation, therapy, all the self-development tools. I got really into, near-death experiences. I found real purpose. And I guess even it helped to read about life after life and the afterlife. And I just became obsessed in certain ways. That was what really helped me. And I've watched YouTube videos and mediumship, and yet also psychological, more mental tools that helped me. So I would do all of that, and then I would have to completely walk away from it. And, there are times that I drank too much wine and just had to be in that unhealthy space. So I don't want to by any means come across that I had it all figured out and it was this linear path of, okay, I felt sadness and I did this and I just focused forward. It was definitely, there was a messy path, but I also think that I did have a foundation. I will say that I think I had a foundation from prior work, and even just a natural inclination towards wanting to understand myself better, wanting to process things. I'd already been in therapy prior to that. That really helped, I think, prepare me, the tools that I had already developed along the way, if that makes sense. So, but yeah, I would say, so I don't know if that answered directly the question of a focus, but I would say the path and the journey was a mixture of all these things that helped me forward. And then I do think, speaking of being in the music industry, it was a career at the time that was very fast paced and
Yes.
it kept me very busy. And while I wouldn't want to encourage someone to just bypass their grief, because that is really, moving through it, but there is a balance because there's only so much you can hold at a certain time. And I think having things that help propel you forward can help as well. And for me, being busy and just having me have to wake up in the morning, having to have me put makeup on the morning, which for me, again, come back to that, I'm like, nothing, I have to put on makeup to get through your grief. But for me, it helped that, okay, I have to get up today and I have to put on makeup and I have to get in my car and I have to drive to work. Oddly, that was helpful because it was the day-to-day tasks that anyone that is in the raw stage of grief, that is very painful. I mean, the idea of even just getting up and brushing your teeth, as you know, you've experienced, can be a really painful task,
Yes. And I agree. Sometimes the day-to-day tasks bring some meaning, meaning and purpose. You have to get up and do something.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to ask you, you've taken this and obviously you've brought it into the work that you do. So what would you say is sort of the main focus of your coaching programs, like for your clients?
Yeah, that's a great question because I feel like I'm in a little transition even with my coaching, just how I even want to more expand and serve. I would say the main focus would be the transformation. So I have clients that come to me that are really wanting to find a sense of self, purpose, self-love, work through a trauma or tragedy, grief, but also kind of propel their lives forward in a way. So how I coach and what I think personally, it's the client's area of focus. So they come to me with what they want to work on and where they want to be. I have no problem saying to a client that isn't my area of expertise. I'm clear that I'm not a business coach. I'm not a sales coach. I'm not someone that's going to help you market your business or, those kind of things. I'm really about the holistic person and soul. And as I shared, I really believe my destiny is your destiny. It's a little bit of my tagline in helping you determine, meaning the client, their answers, their truths within to then move forward. So I tend to focus on the client within, what are those inner truths? What are the inner answers? What are the wisdom, the pain, the challenges, the old patterns, the thoughts that might be holding them back? Everything within to then take that forward in each individual area of their life. So I would say that really it's about them coming to me to help tune back into themselves, finding that sense of self, who they really are, how they really want to show up, and then taking it, transforming it forward. And with that, as I shared earlier, it's not necessarily one thing or the other. I've had clients, as I said, that, are moving towards something really exciting and yet also at the same time in the midst of a breakup or of a relationship, yet their careers are skyrocketing. And that can create conflict within themselves of, what's happening in them. And so I like to help more, as you were talking about integration, helping them kind of back into themselves, because I really believe when you can get that clarity and anchor yourself in yourself, build the foundation of your values, what's important to you, your purpose, even your pain, even your, experiences that perhaps don't feel good. It's all information. It's all a part of who you are, that when you can allow that to be present, that's your information and the clarity to help build from to then move forward. And I apologize, my dog is kind of moving around. I hope that if anyone hears the sound, so I apologize. Yes, she's here and she started wiggling and I'm like, no, we're on a podcast. But anyway, but I hope that answered that question.
Yeah. Yes, I love the tagline. I was going to ask you, your destiny is my destiny. What does that mean to you? But thank you. You've answered that for me. I like the idea of journeying back to self. I think that after any type of experience, we become very detached because that experience, especially traumatic experiences like the death of a loved one, it does. You lose a sense of self. You know, I always speak about the shattered worldview, where your view of the world that changes, but also the self changes when that happens. And so the journey back to self with this foundation that you talk about, whatever that foundation may be, whether it's your values or whether or not it's a higher power, whatever that means for you in your life, I think that is a very solid place to be able to reconnect to the self. And it's such a healthy place to be. And yeah, thank you for that.
You're welcome. And to touch on that more, I speak from my own experience as well. But as you're talking about the journey back to yourself, and then the parts of yourself that get disconnected, that's what I mean in that the grief. So if let's specifically talk about like the death of a loved one, clearly there's grief around that loss, but there's also grief around the loss of the relationship. For example, using my own experience, I don't know myself outside of not being a sister. So does that mean I'm not a sister anymore? I was proud of that role that I had in that life and with my brother. So parts of myself, I felt I was grieving, parts of the relationship, parts of the future, so the grief is not just about the loss of that person, of course, and that's a big, heavy weight of it. But it is really about the loss of our identity. Who are we now? What do I even believe in? What are my values? What is important to me? And that all can change. I'm so sorry. You're my dog. I'm so sorry. Should I mute it or?
No, let her bark.
Okay.
Yeah, she wants to be on the podcast. That's fine.
Outside of grief, when clients come to me and just, let's say they're just stirring and changing and they want something new in their life. Okay, that's a different anchoring point because it's not from such a low place. And even that has grief. There, parts of themselves that they no longer identify with, and now they want to, launch into this future. But when you're coming from a space of raw grief and pain, again, that gap that you're trying to bridge, it's really important to give space for all of it, especially when there's loss, because I speak for myself and I can speak for grievers in general. It's hard to look at the future because that person that you're grieving isn't in that future. So how do you help someone move forward? And it's really, my work and the work that we do at even the organization I work for is really about helping maintain that connection. Maintaining that connection to that loved one and bringing them forward with you. And also acceptance that on earth that they're not here. And so really working with the pain and the grief and also hope for the future. And that's really a lot of the work, And as far as the life coaching process, whether it's grief of the loss of a loved one or just grief of parts of ourselves that you're now trying to re-identify. What do I believe in anymore? What do I want? What do I value?
Yes.
What's important to me? Because it changes. And so, but it's also really powerful information, those questions.
I was looking at your Facebook and I saw that you did a Color Your Soul workshop. Do you want to tell us about that? Is it something that's available at the moment? Can the listeners still get in on the workshop?
Thank you for asking. I'm really excited about it. And I actually have one coming up called Color Your Grief, which I'll tell you about. But so yes, Color Your Soul was an online workshop that I don't have scheduled at this moment, but I will have more of. I'm trying to create it where it will be available that you don't have to have me necessarily present, creating it with videos and stuff. But I do have one in person coming up August 28th, but I don't know if your audience, if anyone's in the Los Angeles area, they can go on my website and find out. But the gist of Color Your Soul is a powerful, I believe, way that I bring coaching, creativity together. And it is full circle of what we're talking about in that I love, as a makeup artist, that artistry in me, as a singer, that creative artist in me, loving the idea of spirituality and self-development and personal development, all of those passions of mine in one, where I invite the, client or anyone to really help access their sense of self by way of color, and I don't want to give it all away, but I take you through meditation and journaling and help you identify some parts of yourselves through the artistic expression of painting, where you literally will be painting your soul on a canvas. So you walk away with this canvas of yourself. And it's so powerful because, as anything, there's tools out there that can help us access our own inner truths and wisdom and answers that we might have. So this is just a journey to get them there in a fun, creative way. I say like a light way to go deep. And then now you have, your own, I feel like the people are we are our own masterpiece. And just so if you can paint that, you have your reminder. And now I will be doing the grief. So color your grief. I'm extending it into that, where I'm inviting people to express their grief by way of creativity and explore that and paint that quite literally. So it's a powerful, powerful process, if I do say so myself. And the feedback has been really great. So I will have more to answer your question. I just don't have an online one scheduled at the moment. But if you share my information, they can kind of keep up. Or if they want to sign up for my newsletter, I will be sending that information out.
Okay, perfect. We can link that for the listeners.
Yes.
And I'm sure that my listeners here in South Africa, they can tune into the ones that are online. Yes. And then the listeners that are in the Los Angeles area, they can come through and spend the day with you on the 28th of August.
Yes. And my birthday is August 19th. So it's like a little, us Leos, we celebrate all month long. So come celebrate with me and color your soul with me. But yes, I will be happy to link that. And that'll be on the 28th in person. So it'll be fun.
Yeah. Well, that's what I love about it. Healing can be fun. And I love that you're incorporating the creative side into this work. I love it. I love it.
I love that you said that healing can be fun, because I think you're absolutely right. And it's if you think about it, almost a conflicting statement, because when we think of healing, it's associated with the pain that we're experiencing and some of the uncomfortable feelings. So that's not to negate that, but how we access that and how we process that can be joyful and fun, and not always, but it can be. And that's the point of just bringing, integrating it all, and being present with it all and allowing it all. And one doesn't have to negate the other. And you can have the feeling of, sadness and also joy at the same time, So I appreciate that way in which you brought that forward, because that is the intention of the workshop. And in fact, a lot of things come up, as far as some of the emotions. But the expression of that can be fun and painting, and there's no rules, and we can be uninhibited and unleash our heart in that way. So thank you for saying that.
You're welcome.
And getting it.
Yeah, no, I'm a big believer in that. And I think, when we are ready, right? Because we need to be ready. Mm-hmm. We can make it fun. We can bring in those little rays of light, that little bit of creativity that just helps us through.
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask you about any of your success stories. Do you have any success stories that you can share with us?
Oh, that's a big question. The coach in me wants to say, well, I'd have to identify what success means, right? So, because that's a big, what does that even mean? What is success? So if I were to ask myself that question, success meaning a sense of fulfillment and a sense of happiness, or a sense of feeling like a box has been checked off, I would share a different story. If it's like, oh yes, I got acknowledged for this thing, or I have this acknowledgement from an outside source, that would be a different story. But my intuition to share would be, you mentioned my brother's music, and I'm so sorry. I feel like my dog is, I hope it's not distracting. Share a little Her little thing is,
She's drinking water
yeah,
now.
she's drinking water.
Or is she, because
His tag.
it's the tag. That's
Mila, come here. I had her on my lap to keep her from this, so I apologize. And the listeners, I hope you're dog lovers or animal lovers, and sometimes we know are.
Yeah, and I also want to say that. Yeah, I also just want to say that she's got such a cute story of the way that she came to
Yes, well, I'll share that too. We'll answer the success story, and then maybe it comes full circle
and then we'll tell that story.
But you mentioned my brother's music and having, that some of those albums. The one you're in particularly, I Need Hope, is the song that, I did the background vocals. My brother had done. He was working with some of his musical friends and artists, and they were writing music. So he had his vocals, in different recordings. And so at the time I was working for a really, prominent recording studio here in Los Angeles. So basically we took all his vocals, and then his musical friends came together, including myself, and we laid down the tracks and the music. It was, I'm getting choked up even thinking of it, but it was his ultimate dream, getting those songs that he had been working so hard on. So we did that. Then I also found, when you were talking about the acoustic songs, some of his even unfinished work, just stuff that was probably one of the most painful experiences of my life, was listening to his music after everything happened, because there was songs I didn't even know existed, but felt like they needed to be out there in the world. So getting back to the question of my greatest success was doing that, because when I look back, I think, how the hell did I do that? Of just bringing everyone together and just listening to his voice and having his music, although I'm so grateful that I have that, for sure. Just a really, really painful process for all of us, not just me, his friends included. And I drag them, you must go to the studio. And I'm really, really proud of that. I'm really proud that having you tell me this today, that you were moved by a song, that just makes it successful. That makes it, to me, that I'm so grateful that I did that. And again, I don't mean to take full credit for that, but I would say I was definitely the ringleader of bringing everyone together. And it was this mission, like I had to do it, almost at the cost of my own grief, because it was so painful. But I'm really proud of that. And I think I feel very successful in that.
And I also think, if I'm listening, Destiny, the way you describe this, that is all part of the healing process, right? Going through that, really, I like to say, like sitting in your misery, being in it fully, completely immersed in it. That's part of the healing.
Absolutely.
When you come out the other side, you're not moved to that extent anymore. Because you've processed a lot of the pain.
Absolutely.
In staying in it as long as you did. And I'm so happy that you did that, because really, I tell you, his music is incredible. His voice is so soothing. It just, I listened to the first song, and the first note when he started singing, it just touched me.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I think I'm in love with Destiny's brother. I think so.
Well, if you knew how many emails I get from girls and, telling me, I loved your brother, I had a crush on him, and it's really sweet. But he's, I think what you're picking up on, of course, he was, very handsome, and his music and his voice. But my brother, and this is consistent, his vulnerability and his authenticity that comes out in his music is what, I don't want to speak for you, but I know enough of the feedback and people that have shared that had the experience of knowing him, some that didn't. It's the same, of just his rawness and his truth and vulnerability, and sharing his lyrics and his music and his voice. I think you felt him in his soul, and that is going to invite love,
Yes, I could feel it, and I was moved by it, and I'm getting the album.
Yes, well, I would love to share it with you. I'm happy to. I'll send you some links, and if you want to share the links, but I'd be happy to offer that to you.
Thank you.
So
thank you, Destiny.
You're welcome.
You guys were amazing together. I saw some of your photographs on Facebook. Yeah. And you even look alike,
Oh, thank you for saying that. Yeah. If you met us, like I had more of the Italian side, and he, had a little bit more of the Irish part of us. So we're like a split. But then when you see like certain mannerisms or expressions, I think that's what you see, because we were just, I would say, like in a nutshell, we had this depth and still have this depth, but also very silly and goofy. We were just always laughing, Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Beautiful. Destiny, any last message of hope for the listeners before we close?
Well, just thank you for having me. And I love the conversation. And speaking of, it's such a deep conversation that I'm sure we could talk hours and hours about, but it really does come down to, a message of hope. And I think what I would probably close on is that when you do allow the experiences that we experience, sometimes really painful, and I understand this space of wanting to get to the why, like, why is this happening? Why did this happen? And there's value in that question. But when you move past that to, okay, it did happen, and who am I becoming as a result of it? Who am I as a result of it? How, I don't want to say how can I serve, but in a sense, and when you start to allow that to move you forward, there is hope there, because you do start to discover different parts of yourself, and you show up differently in your life and with relationships, even in relationship to the grief. And, I would do anything to have my brother back. And I don't want to speak for you, but I would imagine it's the same for you. But through this, my relationship with my brother is also deepened in such a way that I keep him so present with me. I mean, the fact that we've been having this conversation, I can't tell you how many people have told me, like, oh, I feel I know your brother through me and through, my family, and just these continual conversations. So I would say that's the hope, in that the purpose, turning that pain into purpose, transforming that, life experience, there can be things on the other side. And we may not know why, but the possibility is there to really become greater versions of ourselves and have meaningful and purposeful lives, and offer those after their sense of hope, hence the song my brother and I did, called I Need Hope.
I Need Hope.
There's always hope.
Yes. Thank you for that, Destiny.
Yeah.
Sure. This just blows my mind. It really does. It blows my mind. Before the listeners write me lots of messages, we have to share the story of your doggy.
Oh, that's right. Little Mila that distracted us all. And I want to apologize for that, because I had it all planned and I have the door shut. But I guess it's just such a great practice that sometimes, we can have all the things we try to control, but things can be out of our control. And it's a great practice and reminder of that. But yeah, briefly, I had a dog before. Actually, I had two dogs before, Sadie and Sierra. But Sierra, who was my previous dog, and she passed away. And I had her for 12 years and was just, talk about grief and the pain of my brother. I mean, she was there through everything.
Sure.
And she passed away right during the pandemic. And it was unexpected. It wasn't like one minute she just started having seizures, and it turns out it was a brain cancer. And 5 weeks later, she had passed away. So, I know we've all experienced so much. Here, she's talking again. Hold on.
Yeah, that's the worst kind. Oh, I know. I've also lived that life of losing pets, and it's devastating.
So devastating. It was really, really painful. And I'd already experienced that with my dog before, Sadie. Mm-hmm. That was also very painful. But I had Sierra with me to kind of support that. After Sierra passed, I didn't know myself without dogs.
Yes.
I mean, in my adult life, it was just so devastating. Also during the pandemic. And, when you're in a routine, your dogs rely on you. I mean, they were part of my everyday life. So it was a really, really devastating process. And I'm sure any listener that has animals, I don't want to limit it to just dogs, because, whatever their pets, they're parts of our lives and family, and it's a devastating, significant loss in our lives. Anyway, I thought, I'm never having a dog again. And, that doesn't last too long. Yeah, we all say that. But a few months later, I started to kind of feel a little bit ready. And sure enough, a friend of mine was like, there's this little dog. And I had told her prior, I said, because she's an activist in animal rights and she has a lot of access to different animal rescues. I said, no senior dogs. I can't go through heartbreak again. I just want a puppy. sure enough, she sends me a little picture of this little dog, and it was basically kind of a 911 emergency. This little dog, her previous owner had had a stroke, and although still with us, was just not able to care for the dog. And so it was Mila.
Oh,
And so here's this, she's 12 years old. So I said, no senior dogs. Here I am. I'm like, okay, sure. Because I thought it was going to be temporary, that I would take her on. And then when it was determined that the previous owner just wouldn't be able to care for her because she too was older, she was 87, then it was like, well, here Mila was in her grief. I mean, she was with this previous owner and then never saw her again. And so I am now caring for her, which I thought was a temporary situation, and I fell in love with her. And so I just felt like we were both grieving. I was grieving Sierra, she was grieving her previous owner, and now she's my little, it's been about a year and a half. She is the cutest little thing. I'm sure you've got her spunky energy and her bark. She's about 9 pounds, but her bark is like a, Rottweiler. She thinks she's a large dog. Yeah. But she was such I really believe we helped each other in our grief. And that too is a message of hope, in that, getting back to that question of hope, is that just when you think your heart is broken, just when you think you're never going to love again, or just when you think it's, there's no possibility for joy and happiness, something comes along and then opens your heart up again and expands your heart in a new way. So she did that for me, and I hope I did that for her.
I'm sure.
I think so.
I'm sure you did. And she makes a lovely companion. And I think she gets you back into your routine that you missed, because we also grieve our routines that we have. And so you missed that when you didn't have your routine anymore. And that's something that COVID taught us, that we can grieve our routines, right?
Absolutely.
And so she gave that back to you. Restored a part of that, part of that you were missing.
Yes. I was just going to say, that's such a great point as a reminder to your audience, is that, giving that space to grieve. When we think of grief, we think of the heavy feelings and the, heavy experiences. And of course, but it's also those little micro moments, our routine, the daily parts of our lives, that when that shifts and changes, there's loss, there's a gap in that. And it does create the question, what do I do now? Where do I go? And I think that's what COVID represented, as you said, for a lot of us during the pandemic at that time of lockdown. And although there was absolutely some positive, from people I've talked to, and how it helped reshape and, reprioritize and reassess their lives, there was also loss and significant loss, not just from obviously those that, had the virus and passed, and that definitely don't want to make light of, but within ourselves, our daily routines, our livelihood, the lifestyle, the interactions that we had, whether it was coworkers or neighbors, all of it. And there was grief all around that. So it's really special that you acknowledge that, to give space for that.
Yeah. And I also think it reshaped how we grieve COVID, because, even we couldn't follow the normal processes that we would if it was the death of a loved one. We couldn't go to the hospital. We couldn't hold the person's hand. We couldn't go to the funeral. Remember, in the hard lockdowns, we couldn't go to the funerals.
Absolutely.
And all of those processes, it's part of the process of the grief, processing of the grief. And so we've had to find different ways of grieving. And then over and above that, there was also, our own grief that we carried in our lives, of our own routines that were lost, and our own livelihoods.
Absolutely.
The interactions with others, like you mentioned. I think introverts became even worse. Introverts and extroverts were these bug-eyed people, like, against the windows trying to break out.
Exactly. It really amplified a lot, amplified perhaps, some of the challenges we face, and it also amplified, things that we value, things that are important to us. And, I definitely tend to view life, or my worldview would be that, it's all information for us to pay attention to. And I think it was teaching moments and clarifying moments for all of us. And again, not to make light of the gravity of it, but there was also a reset and evaluation period for all of us to, help put us back on a path, not just as a collective humanity, but individually in our lives. I know I can speak for myself. I really got clear on, the things that I no longer wanted to experience in my life, and also that I really wanted to bring more of in my life. I can speak candidly that at the time I was in my coaching, but also was still having this particular day job that was just not fulfilling me, but felt I needed it to support the coaching and what I'm doing. But it didn't feel good for me. So it was just one of those things. And so of course, with the pandemic, I was no longer in that day job. And in some ways it could sound like, oh yeah, woohoo. But I think it made me realize that what was important to me, it wasn't so much about having a quote unquote day job. It was about what that particular one was requiring of me. And I felt I was kind of out of disconnected with myself, of just, this isn't fulfilling me, the job itself, and felt that if I'm going to have a day job while I support, these other areas of my life, I want it to have meaning and purpose. So it really helped me stay really aligned in that path. Otherwise I might have continued on, who knows, in that, because there was financial, benefit there and some other things. So just one example of ways that there was some value in that period to reevaluate.
Yeah. We had these pockets of traumatic experiences before, but with the pandemic, everybody experienced it across the globe. And so it was a global traumatic experience. And now there isn't a person in the world that does not really understand a traumatic experience, because we've all been forced into it. And we've all been forced to kind of sit in our misery and, do the reevaluation. All these things that you normally would do after an illness or a car crash or a dreaded disease or something like that. But now everybody had to reevaluate their lives. And I think personally that what came out of the pandemic and, the way that people have self-assessed and chosen their own passions, like what you've just described, I think it's the right step in the direction for shifting the consciousness of how we think of healing and the way we think about trauma, as humanity. And so, wow, this has been awesome.
I know. I loved it. I feel like, all these parts of our conversation, we could probably go in so many different directions. They're so rich of the path of these conversations could go, because there's a lot there. But I wholeheartedly agree with you there in regards to the collective value of just the space that we are all in, and what it brought us to, and a deeper understanding. While I think there was a lot of division, there was also a lot of unifying, bringing us together, and, it all exists, it really helped bring out so much. And I think we're in some ways still in that process of kind of adjusting and redefining and reevaluating just as a whole. But that is the work, as we kind of come in this new earth.
Destiny, thank you.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed being here, and I appreciate your questions and having me on and allowing me to share, and you're holding the space for that.
Yeah, it's been absolutely pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for sharing your brother with us, Joseph. He's really special, and I'm really glad that he's your brother.
Oh, thank you so much. I concur. I consider him, and that's one conversation I'm very grateful that we had together, that we knew that we were there was a soulmate connection. Our society, soulmate is identified more with a love or a romantic relationship, but I really believe it's a mate you have that is a soul partner, and we definitely were that in this lifetime, and perhaps many. And so I'm glad he was my brother too.
Yeah. And perhaps again in the next lifetime.
I hope so. Definitely.
Well, you have a wonderful, wonderful day.
You as well.
Take care.
Thank you so much, Marlene. Bye.
That wraps up this podcast episode. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy my podcast, please take a minute to give me a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. Please subscribe in your favorite podcast directory so you don't miss an episode. Please consider following My Centered Life on Facebook and Instagram for daily inspiration. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. You can catch me again in the next episode. Same time, same place. Sending you lots of love and light. Bye.